proof of life. At first, this picture looks like a classic ransom photo. Kidnappers often provide such a picture as a so-called proof of life. This would already be disturbing enough, but the truth behind this photo is far more gruesome than just an ordinary kidnapping. Since the late 1990s, serial killer Israel Keyes has been active in the United States before he was caught in 2012. Keyes targeted random people all across the United States to avoid detection with months of planning before he committed a particular crime. He specifically frequented campgrounds and isolated locations. Due to this cautious approach to his crimes, he became known as the serial killer no one even knew existed. He supposedly killed 12 people over a time period of 14 years, although he only ever admitted to 3 murders. One of these murders involved 49-year-old William Scott Currier and 55-year-old Lorraine Simone Currier. What he did to this couple is a perfect example of his methodical way of murdering and showcases why he remained hidden for so long. The murderer had watched the couple for more than 2 years to prepare for his crime. Keyes broke into the Currier home on the night of June 8, 2011, and tied them up before driving them to an abandoned farmhouse where he shot Bill before sexually assaulting and strangling Lorraine. Their bodies have never been found, making their disappearance a mystery at the time, once again showing his methodical approach to his murders. However, when it comes to his last victim, he completely forgot this cautious approach. And this also brings us to the girl from the photo I showed you at the beginning. In 2012, Samantha Koenig was 18 years old and working at a coffee shop in Anchorage. Even though this shop was located in a city, Anchorage is so sparsely populated, leaving it wide open for predators and other criminals to act out on their fantasies. Keyes just stopped at the drive-through coffee shop and pulled out a revolver. He then bound her hands, jumped through the window, and silenced her by stuffing napkins in her mouth. Then he put her inside his pickup truck and drove her to his house. At this point, he assured her that he only wants ransom and wouldn't hurt her. This was obviously a lie. Once he took the girl's cell phone and credit card, he had no use for her anymore. Keyes locked her up in his tool shed and tied her up by her neck. He then entered his home to check if his daughter and girlfriend were asleep. After confirming that, he poured himself a glass of wine and went back to the shed. Keyes sat next to Samantha, and while drinking his wine, he told her who he would sexually assault her before he would strangle her to death. And sadly, this is exactly what happened. The way he mentally tortured her before killing her demonstrates how twisted this monster really was. In the morning, he just packed bags for both him and his daughter and drove to the airport. From there, they flew to New Orleans to spend a 2-week vacation in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, the FBI was trying to find the missing girl. Even though they had the security footage from the coffee shop, Keyes wore a mask. And once again, the man was not a known criminal. Despite his 11 murders, he was only known as a quiet, normal guy whose worst offense was a traffic violation. When Keyes returned from his vacation, he realized that he could use this situation to still get ransom from Samantha's parents. He just needed a proof of life to motivate them. And this is where this gruesome picture was created. You know that Samantha has been dead for 2 weeks, but despite this fact, she seems alive in the ransom photo. Keyes achieved this by literally sewing Samantha's eyes open with a fishing line. He also braided her hair and applied some makeup before leaning her against the wall. Then he held out a current issue of the Alaska Daily News and took a picture. Later, Keyes dismembered her body and disposed of the remains in a frozen lake just outside of Palmer, Alaska, to the north. An incredibly gruesome and disturbing origin for this photo. Anchorage police found the photo and a note demanding that $30,000 be deposited into Koenig's bank account. Since her parents fell for this photo trick, they managed to come up with $5,000 and deposit the money into an account for Keyes. But Samantha obviously never returned to them. An ATM camera in Arizona had captured his white Ford Focus. By March 13th, a Texas state trooper in the town of Shepherd spotted the car in a hotel parking lot. The trooper waited for the owner to come out and followed until the car exceeded the speed limit. When he searched the car, the trooper found Koenig's ATM card and her cell phone. But sadly, justice was never served. On December 2nd, 2012, Israel Keyes managed to take his own life inside his jail cell. He left behind a message. 11 skulls drawn with his own blood labeled, "We are one." Officials suspect this alludes to the total number of his victims. Today, Samantha's disturbing ransom photo serves as a scary reminder how a serial killer hid in plain sight for nearly 15 years, killing a dozen people while appearing like your average Joe. Death by cannibalism. Michael Rockefeller was the great-grandson of John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest people to ever live. After studying politics, he realized that he was way more interested in artistic topics. He specializes in studying ancient and tribal art forms. Since his dad owned the so-called Museum of Primitive Arts, Michael came into contact with several anthropologists, archaeologists, and adventurers. Eventually, he teamed up with different anthropologists and joined them on some of their expeditions. This interest and sense of adventure led to this picture. At first glance, this photo might seem wholesome. Just a young man who left Western civilization and his rich family to study the art of small indigenous tribes. However, as you can imagine, one of Michael's expeditions took a terrible turn. At some point, he traveled to the country of Dutch New Guinea, today called New Guinea. There, he contacted the Asmat people, a newly discovered tribe inhabiting an island. Of course, with the idea of studying their art and bringing some of their culture back to the United States. At this point, I should mention that the Asmat people believed that white people entering their island were literal spirits, which goes to show that their culture was really different from ours at the time. And so were their laws, because the Asmat people strictly believed in the classic eye for an eye sort of justice. As a result, it wasn't rare that one of the Asmat tribes attacked another, only for that tribe to seek revenge by killing the exact same number of people from the attacking tribe. Oh, and I should mention that they were a famous cannibal tribe. This sense of justice and cannibal culture played a crucial role in Michael Rockefeller's eventual demise. Either way, Michael arrived in the village of Otsjaneb and interacted with the local people. He was allowed to take pictures with them and take pictures of their artworks, but he was not allowed to take any of their art back to his home country. This is also where this picture was taken. Despite this refusal, Michael always respected this decision and never tried to argue with the tribe. Overall, this young man seemed to enjoy both this expedition and interacting with the locals. In one of his diary entries, he even wrote that he preferred this place over his home. This is also the reason why Michael returned to the island in 1961. Sadly, this second expedition would take a terrible turn. On November 19th, 1961, a strong wind capsized the boat the researchers were staying on. Michael and the 3 other members of the team got on the hull of the boat and waited there for some time. Since they didn't have any form of communication systems, no one knew what had happened, and it wasn't clear when help would arrive. This dire situation led to Michael's decision to swim ashore, despite the bad weather. He tied empty gas cans to his body and swam 12 miles to the island. Before leaving, he said, quote, "I think I can make it." This was the last time Michael Rockefeller was ever seen. 12 hours later, the other 3 were rescued and, of course, went looking for Michael. Since Michael was not found, a huge search mission was issued. This included the military, helicopters, tanks, and a $250,000 reward to find the man. After 2 weeks, the search was ended and Michael was officially declared dead, with the cause being drowning. This would already be sad, but as it turns out, Michael probably suffered a way more disturbing fate. After many years of research by different private investigators hired by the Rockefellers, a pretty probable and horrifying picture was painted. Now, as you can imagine, Michael was cannibalized in some way. However, there is more to his brutal death, and I want to explain the brutal backstory of this island. Let's start by explaining what the private investigators found on the island. One of the investigators entered the island a few years after Michael went missing. There, he traded a boat engine for 3 human skulls. When he asked who these skulls were, the indigenous salesman simply said, "Oh, one is the skull of Michael Rockefeller, the guy that went missing here a while back." This can't be proven with 100% certainty, but the investigator did bring the skulls to the Rockefeller family, and they did in fact pay him the $250,000 reward. Even though there was no DNA evidence back then, they could have checked the dental records. So even though this story can't be confirmed, the paper trails seem to suggest that one of these skulls indeed belonged to Michael. Another investigator entered the island sometime later and had an interesting conversation with a village elder. He asked the man if he knew Michael Rockefeller, and the man obviously answered no. The investigators then went like, "Where did you get your glasses?" And the elder just said, "Well, I don't know." And sure enough, these glasses matched the pair of glasses Michael wore when he was last seen. Another reporter named Carl Hoffman entered the village with an interpreter 50 years later. And this is no joke. The first thing they overheard upon entering the village was a group of men saying, "Don't tell the white man about the one we killed." They obviously questioned this group, and the men basically confessed that some members of the village had killed Michael Rockefeller. Apparently, everyone in the village knew about this and kept it a secret. But why did they kill Michael Rockefeller? Well, this all goes back to this eye for an eye justice system they believed in. In 1957, the Dutch government sent a military unit to this island to stop some intertribal wars. Apparently, the situation escalated because the Dutch soldiers didn't speak the language. And I think I don't have to explain what happens when some village warriors try to fight against armed military men. This event caused 2 things. First, the villagers already saw white men as godly spirits. But after they murdered a few of them with seemingly magic guns, they became really afraid of them, and it was common knowledge among the tribes to never attack one of the spirits. Secondly, despite their increased fear of the spirits, their justice system also left them wanting for revenge, a lust for revenge that they couldn't act on, until Michael Rockefeller was washed ashore. The following story is what happened the night Michael went missing. This story was confirmed by several tribesmen, missionaries living on the island, and secret files later made public by the government of Dutch New Guinea. When Michael reached the beach, he was found by a small group of warriors. And seeing the exhausted Michael lying on the ground, they realized that they might be able to kill one of the spirits without consequences. They speared Michael to death on the spot and brought his body back to the village. There his body was used for all sorts of things, and warning it gets pretty graphic. They ate his brain, skinned him alive and cooked his flesh, made arrowheads from his bones, and used his blood for a tribal ritual. I have to give it to them. These tribes were everything but wasteful. Jokes aside, when a few days later literal helicopters and tanks began to destroy the entire jungle, the village elder saw it as divine punishment for killing Michael. Fearing that they would all be killed if the spirits ever found out the truth, the tribes did their best to keep this a secret. And in a cosmic sort of way, they are right. These search parties brought cholera to this island, which in turn killed hundreds, if not thousands, of the indigenous people. In the end, this picture is what remains of Michael Rockefeller's expeditions. A really sad memory, especially considering that Michael actually enjoyed spending time with the locals and preferred their company over his privileged life back in America. It's tragic that these exact people ended up murdering him in such a gruesome way. Volcanic death. Our last photo tells the story of a man who valued his artistic photography more highly than anything else, even his own life. In 1980, massive volcanic activity began to appear all over Mount St. Helens in Washington state. In the following days, the mountain was literally shaking and began to smoke all over. And finally, scientists noticed a magma bulge that would erupt sometimes in the future. As a security measure, they evacuated the area, and most people obliged. After all, a volcanic eruption is a scenario that would frighten anyone, right? Well, anyone except some scientists, adventurers, and photographers. One of these photographers was Robert Landsberg, who desperately wanted to capture this natural disaster on camera. He hiked up the mountain in hopes of taking pictures of the swelling magma bulge. Suddenly, a 5.2 magnitude earthquake struck the mountain. This caused the entire north side of Mount St. Helens to fall off the side of the mountain. At the same time, the magma bulge was uncovered, leading to a massive volcanic eruption, reaching targets in a radius of 15 miles. Just imagine a gigantic landslide combined with magma, and you are right in the area. One of the lateral blasts was directly focused on Robert, who was now the target of volcanic debris as well as the biggest landslide in this area's history. Robert quickly realized that this was it for him. There was no way for him to survive this ordeal. But instead of succumbing to fear, he decided to take as many pictures as possible of this natural disaster unfolding right in front of him. When he was done taking pictures, he launched the second part of his plan, protecting this footage no matter what, even at the cost of his own life. Shortly before the wall of magma, ash, and debris hits him, he puts his camera inside his backpack and holds the backpack against his chest. While holding the bag like that, he laid down in a sort of fetal position on the ground, giving up his own body as the last line of defense. 17 days later, they found his body, and he had actually managed to protect his camera and the amazing footage he had captured prior to his death. These are the final pictures Robert took before he was killed by the volcano. and they are magnificent. In my opinion, he is the epiphany of an artist because, even while facing death, he didn't succumb to his fear and instead tried to capture the beauty of the horror unfolding in front of him, sacrificing himself so that we can see this artistic footage.